Hey everyone, welcome back to our channel. And today we will be analyzing the examiner's report, which is going to be the latest March June 2024 examiner's report. And this will be the part 2. So, in case you haven't checked out part number 1, go and check it out because there we covered the audit risk, and audit response, along with few very important theory questions that I believe you must know if you are appearing for F8 paper. Now, this is going to be part 2 where we will be analyzing the internal control, and the questions that kind of come up are deficiency, recommendation, direct control, and test of control. So, we will be covering all these four things in this particular part along with a theory question which was asked and examiner has few comments on it. Okay. Now let's begin with it, and we will be studying each and every question in detail. So when it comes to question number 2 of section B, it is of 20 marks. Fine. In our paper, in the last paper, there were few important questions, and examiner was very smart to test all the knowledge from internal control. How? He divided the question, the 20 marker question, in three parts. First of all, significant deficiency, which was your knowledge area, So yeah, there were comments like, many students struggled in such easy part also. So this is very important that you don't miss out any part of the syllabus, and at least you read it once, because in case any question come up, you are able to write something, because something is obviously better than nothing, right? It will fetch you at least few marks. Now coming on to the next part was direct control and test of control. Direct control is an easy part, but examiner has deducted lot of marks, and we will be discussing in this particular video how you need to ensure that you get full marks in this question. This was the first type of question, and this was the second type of question where you need to identify the deficiency and you need to write the recommendation for the same. Now let's do, each question one by one. Question number 2A, 2B, and 2C. When it comes to question number 2A, what was the question? Define significant deficiency in internal control. Describe three matters the auditor should consider in determining whether a deficiency in internal control is significant. Now, the problem was this marks allocation, I have done it for you. Okay, the examiner clearly told us that it was of 4 marks. So guys, you need to ensure that you divide it as per the requirement. Fine. So as I can see, 3 matters, so obviously it will be of 3 marks, and definition comes with a 1 mark. Now when it comes to the verbs, there are 2 verbs that I can clearly see, which is define and describe. Define and describe. These are 2 verbs. So please ensure that you are writing it properly. You are writing all these 4 things, 3 matters and 1 definition. Fine. Now, this was a knowledge question, and this should have an opening statement. Examiner has clearly told us that whenever there is a theory question, a direct question, you are supposed to write an opening statement. Why? Because it will give an examiner an idea what all things will be covered in that particular answer. So please make it a habit of writing an opening statement. Now, this opening statement doesn't have to be a long opening statement, just a short one, just a 1 or 2 sentence where you will be telling what all things will be covered in it. Now, understand the requirements and understand the marks distribution. There were few students who wrote long definitions for the significant deficiency. Even this question, I gave it in my test as well. And I saw students, either they ignored the deficiency or they wrote, 6 matters or 9 matters. Guys, no. Please ensure that whatever the requirement is and how much marks are dedicated to it, you don't have to waste your time in AA paper. It's very precious, and you have to save each and every minute. So you have to be very straightforward. You have to write as per the requirement, as per the marks allocated to it. For definition, 1 marks. For description of 3 matters, then 3 marks. Understand the verb. Definition is looking for the textbook based definition. And describe is simply where you describe the situation. If you just simply write materiality of deficiency, the 3 matters, and in one of the matters you wrote materiality of deficiency, this is not enough. Simply providing it in few words, just by mentioning 3 to 4 words, and you expect the examiner to give you full 3 marks, I am sorry, examiner will not do that. So please ensure that you explain it well. Fine. Now coming on to the 3rd marks, examiner has clearly told us, if you write a general statements, for example, leading to material misstatement, you will only get half marks. How you need to fetch another half marks is by explaining it. Okay. Consider the likelihood of the deficiency leading to the material misstatement in future financial statement. This is the correct way and a professional way to write it. So if you are writing, leading to material misstatement, no. Along with it, you need to mention the likelihood of the deficiencies. Guys, there were few students, they be like, ma'am, where did we read it? So guys, this is a part of syllabus and it is clearly given in your study text. In case you are not able to answer this particular question, please ensure that before the final paper, you read it once. Fine. Now, additionally, there was a note under the requirement which stressed that the scenario need not to be referred in answering the question. Now, half of the students will not read that note. I don't know why, but they will try to relate this question to the case. Now, whenever it is required, they don't do that, but whenever it is not required, they do that. So guys, please ensure that you are reading the note, you are reading the marks, you are reading the verbs, you are reading the requirements very, very, very carefully. Otherwise, you will end up losing half marks everywhere. And that is the biggest reason as to why AA students fail and they had to sit for the second attempt majority of times. Okay. I hope it is clear. The biggest lesson for you to learn from this particular slide is I need to read the requirements carefully. I need to be on the point, and I don't have to write a general statements. In order to ensure myself that I explained it fully, I will write complete sentences. Just writing few words will not fetch me enough marks. Okay. Now, examiner has also suggested you few important questions that you need to do before you sit for your paper. These are the questions that he has suggested to you. Please ensure that you at least look at it once. And guys, these all are in your exam kit questions. These are exam kit questions. So you must have already done it. Just make sure that you revisit them before the final paper. Now coming on to the question 2B, which is very, 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 very important. And this is going to be the most important part of this particular video, 2B and 2C as well. 2B was for, is regarding the internal control system. It had 2 requirements. First of all, identify and explain 3 direct controls which the auditor may seek to place reliance on, and describe a test of control the auditor should perform to assess if each of these direct control is operating effectively. Now, one of the common mistake is, again, you do not read the question. You will only identify. The question clearly said you need to explain it as well. Fine. Now, if I do the marks distribution, how my marks will be distributed? 6 divided by 3 is equal to 2. Okay. So 1 for this and 1 for this. Half for this, half for this. This will make it 1. And test of control is complete 1. Now, few students, what they do that, ma'am, identification, explanation, and test of control. Guys, no, this is incorrect way to answer your question. The correct way is identification, you identify, you explain it, you write heading as direct control, and here you write test of control. So 1 marks for this and 1 marks for this. Please understand each and every requirement has a mark. So if you haven't explained it well, your half marks will be deducted from each direct control. If you did not identify well, your half marks will be deducted. So it's very important, where am I losing half marks, where am I getting half marks? You understand this very carefully. We will do each and every part. I want to highlight few important points in each and every requirement. There are three requirements: identification, explanation, and test of control. The first is the identification. Let's focus on it. Identification is of half marks, which is left side of the table. So as I told you, identification is of half marks. Explaining it would give you another half marks. Now, examiner's comment. Guys, these are not my comments. These are examiner comments. He has checked thousands of copies, and after that, he has concluded few common mistakes for us. So make sure that you don't do these mistakes. If the scenario contains a control which is not operating effectively, then this is a deficiency and not a direct control. Now, the confusing part of this question is the examiner has told us to highlight the direct control and deficiency as well. In a student's mind, this would be the most difficult question. Why? Because you have to highlight both negative things and a positive thing. And guys, please ensure that you don't write a deficiency in place of direct control and direct control in place of deficiency. So examiner has clearly told us that if a scenario contains a control which is not operating effectively, that is a deficiency and that is not a direct control. Okay. Now, this is a common mistake that we try to, identify either a deficiency or a direct control from each line. No, please understand the whole scenario first and highlight it. Use two highlighter, that this is going to be the deficiency and this is going to be the direct control. Okay. Now, second comment, purchase invoices are matched to the copy of relevant purchase order, and these two documents are passed to the finance director for authorization. Now, 90% of students will write it as a direct control. Okay. Even if I would have not told you, you would have simply written this as a direct control. But guys, this is not a direct control. This is a deficiency. You need to be very sure that what is being done, how it is being done, and is it correct or not. Okay. Now, this is not a direct control. Why? I'll tell you. If you had written it as a direct control, that purchase invoices are matched to the POs, then you will be getting 0 marks. This is part of deficiency. Why? Because invoices should be matched to the GRM. They should not be matched to the PO. Here, the understanding of the concept comes into the picture. How well you know the procedures, how well you know the systems, how well you know the documents. I know things at first glance would appear so beautiful. Okay, this is being done and this is being sent to authorization. No, the matching is incorrect. So this was a deficiency and not a direct control. Now, coming on to the identification, I would like to give you another example. When identifying direct control, it is important that the control described is complete. What do I mean by it? For example, in the question that was in the exam, each employee has a staff identity card which they use to sign in and sign out as a out of the report at the beginning and the end of each shift. So students have identified this, that there is a sign in sign out system, hence it is a good point and hence we'll get full marks. No guys, no, this itself is not a direct control. to be effective as direct control, this needs to be supervised, okay, which would ensure that the staff are not signing it out and for other employees. So make sure whenever you are doing the part of identification, you are not just picking half sentences, you are identifying it completely. Fine. Now the first part where we had to get half marks, we got it. Okay. So two lessons that I will not confuse direct control with the deficiency. And secondly, I will not look at half sentences. I will look at full sentences. Now coming on to the explanation, which is also the part of the left side of the table, and we will be getting half marks for it. What examiner has to say about it? The explanation need to be specific to each control. Now, whatever the deficiency, whatever the direct control you have identified, the explanation has to relate to it. Now, why the examiner has clearly outspoken this thing is because you guys have a habit of writing general statements. What general statement? This will prevent from fraud and error. This is a general statement and you will not get any marks for it. How will you get this half marks? When you specifically tell me how this control will prevent fraud and error. Because if you are writing such general sentences that this will prevent fraud and error, actually every direct control is meant for it. So what are, how these three direct controls that you identified is helping me to prevent it, right? So make sure your explanation has to be specific. It does not have to be a general statement like this will prevent fraud and error. Fine, everybody got it. I hope everybody just got it. Okay. Now coming on to the right side of the table, which will fetch you complete 1 marks. Few comments that examiner has for us is a test which starts with check is unlikely to provide sufficient details as to how the auditor will test the control. Not just check, but also observe. These are the few action words that are used by AA students very often when it comes to the test of control. Guys, please ensure that just mentioning you need to check. What are you checking? How are you checking? If these details are not there, you will not get your complete 1 marks. Fine. For the control over the supervision of staff of identity cards, simply recommending observe the sign in sign out process. See, observe. You will only get half marks. How will you get another half marks? To confirm that the process is being supervised. So you observe, okay, you are observing clock in, clock out. But why are you doing it? You are doing that the supervision process, okay, to confirm the supervision process. So this is the reason, majority of students will lose half marks because they will write 4 words and they will expect the examiner to give you 1 full marks. Guys, this is not gonna happen in simple words, okay? Now, focus. Acha, this is also the common thing that I have noticed that, focus on what the auditor should do rather than provide the recommendations for the management. In test of control, you guys are writing recommendation, which will give you again 0 marks. Okay. So you need to understand what is being asked. How am I answering that? Did I answer everything? Did I write half everything or not? Now, what are the important questions that you should practice as per the examiner? Are these questions? I know you must have already done it if you are following any exam kit, but please make sure you revisit once again and you see these questions once again. Now, coming on to the last question, which is question C. Question C told you to identify. First part of the requirement, explain 5 deficiencies and recommend. Okay, so 10 marks was divided into 5 deficiencies, and each deficiency will of 2 marks. How will you get 2 marks? Half for the identification, half for the explanation, and 1 complete marks for the recommendation. So you need to understand the requirements, you need to understand the marks distribution. First part, we'll do the first part, that is the identification. Identification will fetch you half marks. Now, guys, we are doing deficiency now. We are not in the direct control. Deficiency are the negative things, okay? This session, a number of candidates identify irrelevant deficiency. Even if these deficiencies were not in the case, they just identify irrelevant deficiency which has, which examiner told us. For example, purchase order should be 4-part. Okay. So there must be a question where, there must be a sentence in the question where they mention that it was a 2-part, and they identified a deficiency that it should be a 4-part. However, this was not a deficiency as the scenario stated that the orders were multi-part. Okay. So guys, please ensure that you are reading the case very carefully. Is it really a deficiency when it comes to the case? Fine. Now, when copy pasting the facts from the scenario, care must be taken to identify and record the actual deficiency from the scenario. This was the important thing that I told you in the risk part as well, that you guys have a habit of copy pasting the whole paras, whole paras. That examiner will do the identification. No, guys, this is your duty. You have to make sure that you identify it for the examiner, and you don't copy paste everything from the scenario just assuming that I have identified. You will not get half marks for identification if the actual deficiency is not being highlighted by you. Now, coming on to the second part, which is explanation. Answers which just stated payroll calculations may be incorrect will fetch only half marks. 0 marks as it does not state, okay, payroll calculations may not be correct. Okay, this is the deficiency explanation that they have given. Fine, 0 marks. The examiner told us that it would be giving 0 marks. Why? Because it does not state that the system generated errors may be missed and the impact of wages paid to the employees. So you did not tell me the impact and you did not tell me how it was a deficiency. If you are not telling me these two things, you will not get 0.5 marks. You will not get 0.5 marks. Okay. Just a minute. Okay. Now the explanation need to be very specific to each deficiency, as it is not sufficient to state this will result in fraud and error. Now, just like direct control that this will prevent from fraud and error, if you are writing general statement like this will result in fraud and error, again, 0 marks. You need to be very sure that you are writing explanation specific to the each deficiency that you highlighted. Then coming on to the last part, which is the recommendation. Recommendation has complete 1 marks, but how will you get those 1 marks? Recommendation must be action rather than just the objectives. Recommendations which are phrased as ensure that are unlikely to gain much credit. Why? Because those needs to be actions, not insurance. Okay. Now, candidates need to take care to ensure that recommendations are properly described, clearly address the specific control deficiency, identify a practical situation. Now, they should be clearly described, properly described, just mentioning, check, there should be, no. That should be very clearly identified and explained. For the invoices are not sequentially numbered, deficiency, the recommendation invoices should be sequentially numbered will only get you half marks. If you mention that regular sequence checks should be undertaken, then you will be getting another half marks. Okay, so guys, please ensure that you are writing everything, and that is where the majority of students will lose marks, because they will be either writing general statements or they will be writing incomplete things. Fine. If you are doing such things, then do not expect to get full marks as well. Okay. So these are the important questions that the examiner has told you to do for the internal control. Which part of the internal control? The deficiencies and the recommendation. Deficiency and recommendation. Okay. So that's it for this particular part. I'll see you in the third part now, which will be covering your substantive procedures in detail. Fine. So we have a substantive procedure which is being asked in your question number 3, and we will be covering that particular part in detail. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye. Take care. All the very best for your paper.